Thanks so much, Larry. So, so, so beautiful. And thank you so much, Dave. It was very, very beautiful and sweet to be sort of behind the scenes getting to hear that gorgeous davening. So thank you both so much for your beautiful voices and your beautiful words. And it's so nice to be here with you all. I'm really, really excited to be spending my first Rosh Hashanah at CBST. And I just want to say Shana Tova. So Shana Tova, and I will head into my drash. A person only gets to move to New York City for the first time in her life once, and it's a pretty big deal. Or so writes Elizabeth Gilbert in her best-selling novel, City of Girls, and I'm inclined to agree. My first time was 11 years ago, almost exactly, in late August of 2010, I moved to New York City. I was fresh out of college, I had no job lined up and no apartment. But I was full of idealistic hopes and dreams for what my New York City experience would look like. After settling in, I immediately got an iced coffee from the corner coffee shop and walked around Central Park, stopping to hear every single street musician. It's safe to say I was in love. Somehow, as is often the case, New York provided me with exactly what I needed, and I started a teaching job right before the school year was due to begin. Everything was falling into place, except that, almost immediately, it became clear that it was a terrible fit. I hated going into work, and I would go home crying multiple times a week. One afternoon, after a particularly challenging encounter with a coworker, I worked up the courage to tell my boss that I couldn't stay any longer and that I needed to leave. Only a few months after arriving in the city, I packed up everything I had brought with me and moved back home. Don't worry, there's more to the story, and there were more moves to New York in my future. But there's only one first time, and I was forced to admit that mine had been a failure. It's not so surprising that I've been reflecting on the beginning of my New York journey, considering that here I am, returning to the city more than a decade later. But what is surprising is that I was reminded of that dark period at the very beginning of my adulthood while learning Rav Kook's book, Orot HaTshuva, The Paths of Tshuva, in preparation for Rosh Hashanah this year. According to Rav Kook, there are two types of teshuva. The first is the teshuva that most of us are aware of from our Hebrew school days or from attending high holiday services. It's the teshuva of acknowledging our sins and repenting, of doing the healing work to amend our ways. It's the teshuva of the ashamnu. Ashamnu, we have been shameful. Bagadnu, we have betrayed others. It is not easy work to admit our faults, but it does at least feel like there is a clear way forward once we do so. However, Rav Kook says, there is a second type of teshuva, one that is slightly more ambiguous. It is a teshuva that begins from a place of hopelessness, a place of feeling out of touch with yourself. It is the teshuva of my first few months in New York City. Rav Kook writes that you can recognize the need for this teshuva when you have the experience of feeling lost and adrift. You feel unsure and unhappy. You no longer feel the light of God in your life. It is a dark, dark place. This, Rav Kook explains, of the two types of teshuva, is the one of greater difficulty. This is the teshuva of returning back to yourself. It is hard and messy work, but in many ways it is the most necessary. Ashamnu, bagadnu, we have become ashamed of and betrayed ourselves. Rav Kook gives voice to the type of teshuva that I have witnessed in myself and others many times over the course of my life. The teshuva of leaving, the teshuva of breaking with what is known and going in a completely new direction. I already shared that I left my first job out of college, but I have actually had to get very good at leaving many more times over the course of my life. I've left relationships, some very big and serious ones. I have tried and left many career paths that were not the right fit. And each time, before I quit something and completely rearranged my life, I experienced exactly that dark period that Rav Kook described. A feeling of deep sadness at being so far away from myself without a clear sense of how to get back on track. And each time I have always found my way to the next right thing. Maybe not perfectly or in a linear fashion, but I have always continued to move forward regardless. Recently, at the Tokyo Olympics, the world witnessed gymnast Simone Biles go through a similar teshuvah moment. On the vault apparatus where she was supposed to do 2.5 twists, she got lost in the air and fumbled her vault, which for her was unthinkable. Afterward, most spectators assumed she would shake it off and go right back up there to get it right. However, Simone did something much more challenging. She said no. She said that she did not feel enough like herself to continue and took herself out of the competition. She did publicly what many of us are afraid of doing privately. She checked in with herself and knew that for her, the best course of action was to step away. Rosh Hashanah invites us all to do our own personal reckoning with what no longer serves us. It invites us to be brave with ourselves. My favorite parts of Judaism are often ones where Judaism gives us an invitation to move more radically through the world. Here, Rav Kook's alternate version of teshuvah is making radical room for us to say no, for us to walk away. I am here to tell you that I know this is not an easy or comfortable place to find yourself, but that yes, you have permission to leave and forge a new path for yourself. Even when it's not what is expected of us, even when it is not the clear-cut or easy decision, even when it means stepping into the complete unknown, to have the courage to do it anyway. I'm here to tell you that whatever hardship you might be facing right now, you are not alone. So, what is Rav Kook's remedy for this feeling of spiritual depression? He says it is to trust full force in the process of teshuvah, in the process of turning inward and recalibrating your life. If one does this, he says, they will become filled with strength and spirit. Their paths will become clearer, more sure, and more illuminated. Or, as Evan Harris, the creator of Quitters Quarterly, a real magazine, puts it, they will become filled with a quitter's euphoria. She says, it's like being in love, kind of, except it's being in love with your decision. The point of quitting, she explains, is to get bigger and bigger as a person and move with your own volition. Rav Kook goes even one step further. He says that for those who are able to truly do this teshuvah and become more aligned with themselves, it's as if they are entirely reborn as new beings, and the whole world is created anew for them from scratch. For this Rosh Hashanah, my wish for you is that I hope you believe that there is a brighter world on the other side of your uncertainty and fear. I hope all the banging you do against your heart awakens the innermost chambers of your soul. And I hope you are able to fall deeply in love with your own decisions. I hope it's the start of a beautiful season of returning to ourselves. Shana Tova Umetuka.